Hi all, welcome to our second ever Pressbooks User Group. This is the July meeting, and I'm really excited to welcome everybody and bring us together to talk about a pretty important topic. My name is Steele Wagstaff. I'm the Customer Experience Lead. My co-host today is Jen Martin. Hi, Jen. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, yeah, I'm Jen. I work on the marketing team here, and so I'm just admitting folks as but thanks for coming, y'all.
Thank you for being here, Jen. You'll also see a couple other friendly, familiar faces from Pressbooks. We have Amanda Coolidge here, who's on in the meeting. You'll recognize Amanda from lots of other places, including our monthly product updates, and our colleague Mitch Spieler, who, if you've ever emailed premium support, you've probably heard an accurate, timely response from Mitch. Mitch is also here. I think we'll be helping out in the chat if there's other questions.
I have a
But
little anecdote to share about Mitch, just
oh,
because
please.
we were meeting today and I was trying to figure out how to do something in Zoom, how to turn off these like weird reactions that keep happening. And Mitch, just the way they walked me through it, I can tell what they do for a living because they were like, okay, now click here, now do this. And it was just like such a smooth experience of teaching me how to do something with technology. So all that to say, Mitch is very good at their job.
Yeah, Mitch or Amanda, either of you want to say hello or add anything?
Hi, everyone. Just nice to see you. So many lovely names and faces in here, and great to be a part of this.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here and so curious to know what Carolyn and Lauren are going to share today and learn from everyone how you're solving the problems you're trying to solve and how we can help doing that.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks, Amanda. Well, welcome everybody. The topic for today is managing books and users, and what we wanted to have is kind of a open, friendly conversation about techniques and strategies that different network managers use to keep track of who's doing what on their network. There are many different philosophies for managing Pressbooks networks and being a Pressbooks network administrator. Sometimes you might feel the best philosophy is no philosophy, or your philosophy is ad hoc and developing as it goes. But those of us who have administered Pressbooks networks realize like sometimes success can be its own kind of challenge. Sometimes it feels like, oh, the hardest thing to do is recruit new users. And then once you do recruit a bunch of new users, you have a whole different set of problems. And some of those problems include how do I keep track of which projects are really active? What state are they in? What about projects that I think may be abandoned? How do I find which ones they are? How do I weed them? Should I weed them? Should I remove them? Should I deactivate them? What about users? Is everybody on my network really an active user? Do they need a user account? Are they still at my institution? There's a whole range of questions, and there's a bunch of challenges that come with doing this. I don't think there's a single best answer for these things, but there's a range of different approaches that people have taken. And so we wanted to convene an open conversation on this topic. We've invited a couple of people that have experience with this. They're going to share a little bit of their institutional context and some of the things that they've done. And then hopefully it'll be a free-flowing conversation where we talk and share different uh, questions, perspectives, advice. I'm prepared to share my screen and talk about Pressbook specific features if that's helpful. But we wanted to start by inviting two of, I think we're calling them guest presenters. And so the two guest presenters we have are both experienced network managers in slightly different contexts. First, we have Jessica Kirschner, who's joining from VIVA. And VIVA is an interesting case because VIVA is a shared network where the network is used by many different institutions. And they have a pretty long-running grant program and lots of books and lots of users. And there's been change in who's administered the network over time. Jessica has not been the network manager over the whole course of that. And so coming into a network where there's lots of activity already happening, orienting themselves and figuring out what can stay, what can go, what should be happening here is a challenge many of you can probably relate to. And then the second guest presenter we have is Lauren Ray from the University of Washington. And I think Lauren is the OG network manager, has been there from the beginning. So Lauren pretty much has been there through the whole course of the growth and the success and the weeding and the lots of things to share here. And so we've asked Jessica and Lauren to both maybe just take 5 minutes or so to talk about their context and some of the ways that they've approached this challenge or set of challenges at their institution.
So hi everyone. Steele said I'm Jessica Kirschner. I'm from VIVA, Virginia's Academic Library Consortium. So to add a little bit to Steele's overview, VIVA is as our title suggests, the consortium of all the academic libraries in Virginia. We have 70 members, spanning community colleges, doctorals, private institutions. Our Pressbooks instance is primarily, and I've only been with Viva for 3 years. We've had Pressbooks since 2019, I think, so a little bit longer than I've been here. But our Pressbooks is primarily designed to run to support our OER grant program. So anyone who is awarded a CREATE grant is able to create their book in Pressbooks, but that often does not fill up our books every year. So we open any remaining books up to anyone from the consortia. So anyone who's associated with a member institution is welcome to request a book on our instance. I haven't got into organizing books yet. It is something like figuring out. I'm doing some inventory, but haven't decided cleaning yet. But Steele asked me to come talk about users today. So up until a couple months ago, when Pressbooks made the decision to or recommendation to turn off the auto register or self-register for users, Viva had that option selected. So when I had started with Viva, you could create your own books. I also turned that off and started doing mediated books, but I didn't think anything about users. But when I saw the email go out, I reached out to Steele and I was like, what does this mean? Viva is, like I said, 70 institutions. All of them use different we can't have a single SSO, so that's not a reasonable thing for us to do. I guess I should also add as an aside that a number of our members, especially doctorals, have their own Pressbooks instances. So like they're dealing with things on their own, but on the consortial level, we want the whole idea is of our consortium. We're hoping to provide this to all of our members. And so we can't restrict it through SSO. So we have mediated account creation, and if anyone's interested, I will drop the form that I use in the chat. It's pretty basic, and to be honest, we don't get many requests, so it's really not an extra load for me to go through. After it used to just have a button for requesting books. After meeting with Steele, now it has that option to request accounts too. And to be honest, I haven't had anyone request that. After kind of turning off the self-registering for users, and as Steele and I were talking about it, we were looking in the back end and we discovered that Viva had about 17,000 users on our system, which we don't that's not how many active users we have at all. So I went and cleaned up our users. And so it was actually a very simple process, and I'll show y'all how I did that. I will say that my criteria were very limited, as in they weren't associated with the book, they were gone. And to be honest, I haven't had any pushback from that. There was one account that I had created for some organizational thing, which I realized after and was able to easily, recreate it. But otherwise, I have not had any issues with any of that. So it seems to be a pretty seamless process. I just, to be honest, turned on TV in the background and just went and edited. So I'm sure y'all probably know how to do this, but like I said, I'll just show you quickly. So if you go on the back end, the Minister Network, and select users, this is what it'll come up. You have the different last login can also be useful if you want to delete people who haven't logged in for a long time, or you can see some folks, I added them to books, they haven't logged in yet. I'm not going to delete these folks because I just created the book yesterday, but that could also be another criteria if you wanted to delete folks. Here, it outlines how many books they are for each type of user, but really it's the belong to X books that is the important thing. So if you just sort it, it'll create, which I'm not sure who these users are. So Steele, you and I might have to talk after this because we don't have self-register set up and I did not create those folks. But basically, once you do that, you can just select whoever, and then there is bulk actions delete, and then apply. I'm not going to do it right now because I'm not sure who those people are, but it was really simple. You can do it for the whole page if you want. To be honest, that's what I did because we had 17,000, and as you can see, now we have about 200. So it was just a afternoon of deleting.
Jessica,
God,
that's amazing. I do have two questions, maybe follow-up
mhm.
questions. One was, you mentioned doing mediated book creation and user creation, and you talked
Yeah,
about using a form for that, and you
yeah.
linked to it there. Could you just show an example of what that flow looks like and where it lives in your network? I think that was a question
Uh,
that other users had.
yeah. So right now, it lives on the Viva website. I cannot show that to you because we are undergoing a website renovation at the moment,
No,
but
no
I
worries. So
have
you have so when they learn about Pressbooks, they have the
yeah,
ability to say, "Oh, I'd like to create an account." They submit a form, and then you see the
yeah.
form submission.
Yeah, so it is a Google form. It is hooked up to our Google. It is supposed to send me a notification that a response has been submitted. It does not always do that. Um,
Classic.
but it's supposed to, but I have just time blocked every Monday to go check the results of the form. I look at the spreadsheet. Sometimes there's new folks, sometimes there's not, and I just ignore it. If there's a new response, I'll create the book. Like I said, we've never had any issues with meeting our uh, capacity, I guess, for lack of a better
Hmm.
word. So like it's never really a question of if we have books left, although that is part of the reason we have the form. I do tell folks if they email me and they're looking for press books and I send them the link because I ask everyone to fill out the form. The only ones that do not go through the form are ones that I create myself. For certain like internal projects, but I'm like, if I don't create the form, just shoot me an email. Like it's supposed to be every Monday, but I know sometimes you need it sooner, and sometimes like I'm on vacation or I'm really busy and I don't get to it. So just shoot me an email. But we've never had any issues.
Great, thanks. I think I don't see any other questions in the chat. I did see a comment. I'll just read it from Ed Beck, who says, "Before we implemented SSO, I was restricting by domain." So they were restricting user registration by domain. So I had
Mhm.
gone through and added the 64 different SUNY domains so they could register self-registration, but they needed a SUNY email address. And I know that there are other people that followed a similar approach. They allowed self-registration, but restricted by email domain. I think that's was for some people a viable approach. One of the challenges I think that probably came up for Viva as well is when user self-registration is active on a network, in the top right of your network when you're logged out, there's both a sign in and a sign up link. And so a lot of times what would happen would be a student or somebody would be visiting and reading a book, and the top right, it tells them sign up, and they think, oh, maybe I'm supposed to sign up. And so there were a lot of people that created accounts just thinking they were supposed to, not realizing they didn't need an account to read the free book. And so that in almost every network that had self-registration enabled, there were a lot of people signing up because they thought the website was telling them to sign up. And so the unintended consequence of that is people that have accounts that don't know they have an account or don't need the account, and then there's the Netflix task or whatever that Jessica said, remove, remove, remove.
Yeah,
Jessica,
and it's
do
hard
you
to
have,
tell if
yeah,
it's folks like that or like bots, because you can't know. And to be honest, when you have like you're deleting 1,000 users, I'm not spending the time to go through and look through domains. I love the idea of setting up the domains, but like we don't have that, so yeah.
yeah, and there's another question. I think Kestrel from the chat said, uh, Florida virtual campus just started off with mediated user registration to avoid the extraneous accounts. That they began with the process you're describing, which sounds like it makes sense. Amy Hoffer says, we don't have self sign up, and still our most frequently asked question via the PB contact form is requests for an account from people who think they need to sign in to read a book. So it's a pretty common like expectation that I don't know how to access this book. Do I need an account? And the answer is no, but that it's still an anxiety for some folks. Linda Miles says students who access via LTI or Pressbooks results end up with a subscriber account in the book, which is true. That's necessary for the LTI function. I have many, many, many of these and would like to remove them after the semester. I'm just not sure when I'll have time for that workflow. Yeah, great, great point, Linda. Yeah, it's a challenge, and we can make note of that as something to talk about in a future conversation. Any other questions for Jessica before we move on to our other guest presenter?
I see there is a question in chat
Oh, did I
still.
miss it?
from Carolyn. If they need an account but not a book, are they then assigned to a book?
Oh
If
yeah.
not, why would they need an account? And I think that's a good question. And to be honest, I don't have an answer. So like when they request a book, I automatically create an account. I added the request to create an account just because we were no longer allowing the self-registration. But like I said, I haven't had anyone who's actually asked for that. Um, I uh I would suspect for something like that, it's if a book already exists, like we don't have Pressbooks results since we don't have the integration, since we're at so many institutions, but like, if someone needed a subscriber account to a private book or something like that, um, I believe I have it on the form. I don't remember, to be honest, at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would assume like if it's someone who needs to be added to a book as a subscriber, or someone who's an admin who isn't as familiar with adding users and wants a use, like if someone wants to be added that way.
Yeah, and to your question, Carolyn, I think in Viva's case, what Jessica chose to do was if you are a book administrator, you're allowed to invite other users to your book project. And so I suspect, Jessica, that that may be what was happening with some of those new users that we saw with the weird email addresses. They probably
Yeah.
can be removed and purged. Those didn't look like good email addresses. I don't know what happened there, but we could talk about it after this meeting. But yeah.
Yeah.
There's more conversation about the Linda's comment in the chat. Amy says it would be interesting to have an account type that has an expiration date set at the point of creation. So we're giving this person an account and it expires in a year or 2 years. And then the account could expire or the account could be deleted or you could do a number of different things. That is the really interesting idea. I saw some upvotes for that. Ryan says clever idea and would definitely be useful for LMS integration purposes. Linda then it said, I wonder if there could be a student user type separate from the subscribers. So yes, that's possible. We could create any number of user types and map them to permissions and have it be different from the subscriber role, if that would be helpful for more clarity. That's an interesting idea too, Linda. And then Janelle says, do you allow book admins to, yeah, that was the question that we just addressed. Do you allow book admins to invite new users as collaborators on their book? And Jessica said, yep, happy to let them do that. Yeah.
And one less thing for me to do. I'm happy to turn that over to them.
Jessica, as you were going through the process, were there any parts that felt frustrating or confusing for you as the network manager that you wish were smoother or easier?
I guess the only frustration was I think the deletion process was really simple. Like I said, I didn't have any like high level criteria. It was just if they don't belong to a book, they're gone. I kind of had wished that we had thought about this earlier.
Amanda asked, I may have missed this, what benefit comes from removing inactive users? What impact does having inactive users in the system have? The biggest determinant of what impact it has to do with another one of the network settings, which is can registered users create and clone new books? If you want to allow users to create and clone their own books, then the concern or the problem is if you have users on the network that you didn't want to be there, they have the ability to create, clone, and publish spam and other unwanted content. And that was the biggest downside knock-on effect that we saw with user self-registration. The networks that allowed user self-registration or weren't monitoring who had user accounts were the ones that had the biggest problems or the most frequent problems with, wait a minute, what's this book? This is garbage. Someone's linking out to airline or whatever. Like that happens at times when anyone with an email address can sign up and register for your network. If that's not something that you're doing, then it's mainly just a cruft maintenance problem. When you're trying to find an active user, you have to sort through 17,000 people instead of the 200 people who are actually supposed to be using your network. Um, but if they can't create and clone books, then they're just sitting there on the network with no permissions. They would still be able to be added to a book and cause problems if someone wanted to do that, but it's less of a risk until they have permissions in a book. All right, so thank you, Jessica, I'm sure there'll be other questions later in the conversation. We'll come back to you, but I'm going to turn it over to our other guest presenter today, Lauren Ray from the University of Washington. Go ahead, take it away, Lauren.
Yes, hi. I'm gonna share my screen. I did make some slides, so let me. Yeah, it's funny. Jessica said something like, "How did we let it get this far?" towards in your presentation. I was like, "Oh, that should be the title of my presentation or my side because I've been network admin here at University of Washington for 9 years. No, something close to that. And we have really let it go. It's kind of a one come all situation with our network. So I'm definitely feel like this is a like work in progress, and hope that my our way isn't like the model because there's definitely some management that needs to happen, and would love to get others' advice here. But I am using pictures of my cute cat to illustrate what's going on here. So basically, we acquired Pressbooks in 2018. We have a tri-campus here at UW, so Seattle, Bothell, Tacoma, and we have a librarian at each campus who's responsible for network admin and helping Pressbooks users on their own campus. I'm at the Seattle campus. We started out with manual user account creation, so people had to come to us to get a Pressbooks account, and then in the middle of 2020, we started single sign-on. So we set that up with what's called our UW groups, meaning that basically anyone who has access to libraries databases, so active students, faculty, and staff, can just sign on to Pressbooks with their UW net ID and password and start an account, and they don't need to go through us. And we don't have self-registration. And so when people leave the university, they're no longer able to sign into their Pressbooks account. It's managed through single sign-on and our UW groups technology here. We later started our LTI integration with Canvas and then Pressbooks results, which means that at this point I had hundreds, but it's probably in the thousands now, where we have students who have those subscriber Pressbooks accounts through being added through to a book through Canvas. And we've had really steady growth in users and books since turning on SSO. And we do very little like individual account management beyond individual author requests and consultations. So last year, myself and our other Pressbook Networks admins here decided to kind of take a look at our network and look at how we could manage and rein in what was going on in the network. And a lot of this was prompted by the accessibility guidelines and wanting folks to be aware of what they needed to do in Pressbooks to remediate accessibility issues. So these are the scary numbers that we looked at. At that point, we had close to 4,000 users on our network, many, almost half, close to half of whom hadn't logged in a year. A little less than that hadn't logged in 2 years. About 1,000 at that point had no role on any book, and a concentrated number of users were admins on multiple books. And then with our book data, we had close to 1,000 books on our network total. However, more than half of those were last edited over 2 years ago, and a lot of them had the status of public, and they really shouldn't have had the status of public. So we'd made kind of a set of goals for the next year to address things. So we decided we needed to remove books to help increase our storage space for our subscription. We thought at first we would like identify and help fix accessibility issues on books, and that was really unrealistic. And also, our guidance, sort of university and libraries wide, was that we should not be remediating accessibility issues. We should be instead offering guidance for authors and admins on how they could do that work. So we went towards that goal. Assessing our network and determining if we needed to change some of our policies around storage and access, reminding users of our services. We decided to refrain from removing users because with single sign-on, if someone had an account logged in with their net ID and password, left the university, and then we decided to remove them, if they came back to the university, they would have the same net ID and password, and it would sort of like bar them from accessing Pressbooks. So, and we often have that with, students who leave and they come back as staff, or people who are kind of in and out of our system. We just decided to hold off on looking at removing users because that wasn't kind of our books were kind of a more attainable goal at that point, but I'm curious about some of the questions that have come up here. And to identify books that need more support or promotion. So we have a lot of books on our featured titles list on our homepage where we kind of know the admin, we've worked with them on the book, but we also have quite a few books that look really great and we're completely done and finished, but we had no contact with the author. And so kind of like how can we reach out to people who are, really actively working on books and utilizing them, but have no contact with us. So we set up a book deletion criteria, which was if a book is private and it hadn't been edited for 2 years, we would just delete those books. And if a book was public and not edited in 2 years and less than 100 words, so a lot of people who had started a book and then just made it public and left abandoned the book, we would email that list of people and say, hey, we're going to delete your book in, a month or two. Let us know if you don't want us to. We, I think, heard back from like 2 or 3 people. And then, starting this February, we just started deleting those. So up until this point, we've been, sending regular emails to book admins about the accessibility deadline and that, obviously was extended. We created that criteria for book deletion and deleted those. Big shout out to Amy Hofer, who helped me understand mail merge, which was incredibly useful in contacting book users about the book deletion. We got the accessibility assist tool for Pressbooks and started offering office hours, and began a spreadsheet of this email is no longer active. So when we started emailing people about accessibility and book deletion, where I was getting a lot of those emails back. So people who had left the university. And so we kind of worked on making an action plan with what to do with those folks. And right now we're in the process of updating our user policies and guidelines and creating new onboarding messaging for things like, hey, when you leave the university, make sure you assign someone else as a book admin, or, don't just add people to your book without kind of them having read these user policies and guidelines. So, lastly, these are some of our challenges. So again, the lack of ability to remove users because of single sign-on and really know who they are and why they're in the network. Book admins who have left the university and don't have any other people on their book. Book admins who come in and out of the university system and who basically people who stay out of contact and don't respond or don't want to be managed. And I would say the time-consuming work is like identifying users and then kind of like that figuring out like what we want to do with users. Books are a little bit easier. This is like an example. This is the spreadsheet we had that I sort of anonymized of books where we got, I'm no longer at UW emails. So we tried to categorize these like, their book doesn't meet the book deletion criteria, so we can't just delete it, and there's nobody else on the book. What do we do with those? Ones where there's another admin on the book, do we reach out to that person? Do we just make that person an admin without their permission? People who are their net ID is active and then it's not active. So kind of what to do with those. There's also a lot of books who are students who are doing capstone projects where the instructor, we could like work with the instructor to say, hey, make sure students have like an admin that's a teacher on this book. So this is sort of our like way of keeping track of those emails of people who have left, but I'll just stop now.
Lauren, lots of questions came up, but the first thing I guess I imagine people want to know is how did you derive the email addresses of all of those people? Did you download a CSV from the user list, or what were you doing to generate what you ended up being your mail merge?
Yeah, so we use the tool like what Jessica was showing. So
You
in
filtered.
admin, we downloaded a CSV sorted and filtered by last time you logged in and number of words in your book. And then that was relatively easy to get like a list of email addresses. And yeah.
Linda Miles asked a pretty important statement question, and I think probably worth clarifying. Linda says, if I'm not mistaken, when you remove a user account, you receive a system prompt that asks you to reassign their contributions, their edits. Says, should I delete their content or reassign it to a different user? I've assumed this means that if we didn't reassign their work would disappear, but I've never confirmed that. We've instead made those accounts subscribers in an attempt to retain their work. I'm not sure if this is necessary. And my answer is, this is a situation, this is another place where we've inherited some behavior from WordPress, but we haven't modified the UX very well. The system prompt says, do you want to delete the user's content or reassign it? But it doesn't matter what you choose. Pressbooks actually does nothing. We don't ever touch their content. We don't reassign it. We don't delete it. We just remove the user. We've decoupled user deletion and content deletion entirely, but the UX doesn't reflect that. And so it does produce some anxiety or confusion or fear. And so we're telling people verbally that doesn't happen. I think it probably mentions it in our guide as well, but that's not probably good enough. It'd be better if the product did it, but unfortunately the product doesn't yet. And so it'd be great if we heard this, we made a note and we could fix that in a future release. But if you're worried about that, I think the message from us is don't worry, you can safely remove users without impacting content, which is exactly what Jessica has been doing. Even if Jessica were to delete a user that was active in a book or even an admin in a book, that book and its content would be unaffected by that deletion. So treating them as separate processes is probably the way to go. There was another question from Michelle Braley who asked, when folks delete books, are you clearing content so the shells can be reused? Could you clarify what you mean, Michelle? Are you saying like deleting out the content and leaving the URL in place, or deleting the book entirely so the URL could be reused?
Yeah, deleting the content from it, but keeping the book in place in your system so it can be reused by another author for their books. So if you're paying for like, a certain number of books per year, then you can reuse the content as well as the books that you're getting, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. So just to clarify on that, there's on the Pressbook side, there's no need to keep a shell or reuse it. If you delete or even if you deactivate a book, it doesn't count against your quota. So if you want to keep the URL, then you could simply delete the book and recreate a new book at the URL or clean out the content and keep using the URL. I think in almost every case, it'd be simpler to just delete the book and create a new one at the URL because it's more effortful to go through and delete content individually.
This is
But
blowing my mind. Steele, can you write it in the chat so that I can screen cap it for my team?
sure, yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
do that just after I've, yeah, absolutely. What else did I miss in the chat? Oh, Amy says, this spreadsheet is so organized. Mine started out that way and is now a mess. So I don't know, Lauren, if you did some spreadsheet massaging in advance of this preparation, if you're always this organized, but there's lots of praise for your spreadsheets. Amanda wants one too. Oh, okay, so Lauren still wants to clean it up a little bit. It's ready
Yeah.
for screen sharing, but not quite for sharing. Okay. And Ed Beck says, we only have 14 books with the word test as part of the name or URL, so it's probably fine, meaning this happens quite a lot. Someone creates a test book and then it stays a test
Yeah.
book for eternity. Ryan says, oh, wow, I didn't realize the URLs could be reused after a book was deleted. Yes, they can. Or another thing that you can do is edit the URL of a book to something else, and then the original URL becomes free. And then Wade asked, what was your deletion criteria again? 46 words and what? Or how many months of unused? Or Wade was just saying, remind us of your criteria for deleting books, Lauren.
Yeah, so we had if a book is private and it hasn't been edited in 2 years, we delete it. And if it's public and hasn't been edited in 2 years and has fewer than, it was either 100 or 1,000 words, I need to look back, and we would email, we kind of created a list of the books there, and then emailed all of the admins on those books and gave them a warning. We're going to delete your book because it meets this criteria. If you don't want us to, let us know. And I would say mail merge is really helpful for that because we realized we had a lot of admins that had multiple books, and we didn't want to be like, hey, we're gonna delete your book. What do you think? And then have all these emails like, wait a minute, my one book I don't want deleted, but my other book is fine, and have to do that back and forth. So mail merge really helped with us saying, dear Steele, we are deleting your book, Physics 101. Are you okay with that? So
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, that makes good sense. I've been kind of in the same lane, but haven't pulled any triggers yet.
Thanks, Wade. More questions came in, Lauren and Jessica. Um, Amanda says, somewhat unrelated, but did you find any instances of authors creating, quote, backup versions of their book? If so, how did you deal with that? I have seen that before, for sure. I don't know whether you saw that, Lauren, or others have seen that on their network.
on our network, our School of Medicine does a lot of their textbooks using Pressbooks, and they would create backups or different versions, but they're pretty on top of it with deactivating ones once they've moved on. So I would say it was a lot more practice books. And for a long time, I was teaching workshops where I was guiding people to log in and create a practice book. So it was a little bit of like my own, I created the problem because I was like encouraging people to create a practice book. And then I would say that that was more of like what we saw on the deletion list. And we did go through the deletion list to just try to identify like, is any of this stuff that seems questionable about deletion? And so much of it was like a practice book, a test book, I started this and abandoned it. So it really felt fine to delete that many.
Okay, and then there was a question that maybe I'll just take this one and share. So I want to explain a couple of things and just show them in the Pressbooks admin interface related to deactivation versus deletion versus changing a URL. So if you are a network administrator or an institutional manager, you'll have the ability to come into your dashboard and see administer network and come to your book list. So here from this book list, I found a book here that's called Online ISW Modules. Currently, the URL is ISW Online Test. Well, I don't want test in the URL anymore, and so I'm ready to change that. The only people who can change URLs are network managers, but they can do that by clicking the edit button underneath the URL, and then I'll see the URL here. If I remove the word test, that's all I'm going to change. Don't change other settings of the book, but you can change the book address. And once I save that, the URL of this book will now be ISW Online. So if I visit the book, it now lives at ISW Online, and all of the internal links have now been updated to be, it's removed test from the URL globally. Network managers can do that at any time for any book. Be cautious, be prudent about doing that. If people are already linking to the old book, there won't automatically be redirects in place. So you may also need to set up optionally a URL redirect if you're changing the URL for an already published book, which is probably unwise, but in some cases that may be helpful to do. Now that I've changed that URL, if I wanted to create a new book that was ISW Online Test, the URL would be free. There is another way to free up the URL, and that's to permanently delete the book. And there's two things that I want to show here. So if I come back as the network manager and look at the book list, what you'll see from time to time is as a network manager, you might want to filter and say, show me all the deactivated books. And you might be surprised to find that there are many deactivated books. And you'll say, wait a minute, how did those books get deactivated? Well, the shortest answer is if a user is visiting their book on their dashboard. So if I'm the user of online ISW modules and I'm an end user, at any point I could be like, you know what? I'm done with this book. I'm through. I'm finished. And they can click delete book. And it will say, oh, user, you want to delete your book? Are you sure? And it says, yes, I'm sure. It takes them through a prompt. They click this, they get an email, and then they say, yes, I'm sure that I want to delete a book. Well, when that happens, for them, the book is deleted. It's gone. But for you as a network manager, it's not fully deleted. It's only soft deleted. It's deactivated. So deactivated books usually for network managers are books that end users have chosen to delete, but they're being basically held for final review for you. There have been instances where a faculty member is like, oh, I'm done with this book. I'm ready to delete it. But it's a public, open and licensed book that you would like to keep alive, even though they don't want to keep it alive. Or other cases, hopefully this doesn't happen, but a disgruntled person is like, I was terminated or I left the university, I'm taking this stuff down. And they don't realize, wait, it's public, it's openly licensed. No, we'd like to keep it up. And so in those cases, it's basically held here for you in the deactivated state. And so when you look at a deactivated book, you'll see this activate button. And if you click the activate button, it says, oh, you're about to activate this book, and you can bring it back to life and do whatever you want with it. The other option you have is to say, let's find that book again. Only network managers or institutional managers can permanently delete a book. And to do that, you come to your network book list and you click delete. So suppose this book had been deactivated. When I deactivate it, it warns me deactivating a site makes it unavailable to its users and visitors. This is a reversible action. So I'm going to deactivate it first. This will show up in my deactivated list again. I can filter and say, let me show all the deactivated books. Okay, great. It's been a couple of months. It's been a year. I'm ready to permanently delete this book. I would then click the delete button. Only network managers or institution managers can do this. And it's warning me this is permanent. It can't be undone. It's going to be gone, and so will all the media or H5P that you've uploaded. Those will be deleted. And then I'm saying, yeah, that's fine. I'm ready. I've deleted this book, and this book now will be gone. So the difference between deactivated and deleted books, from your account billing perspective, there's not much difference. Neither of them are counted against your quota. But from the can I recover from this, deactivated books you can recover, but the URL is being held, can't be used by something else. Whereas deleted books, instead of 132 books, there's literally just 131. That book was gone. And so just think of that permanent versus, I'm not sure, temporary. If you do put a bunch of books into deactivated state, it probably is helpful to clean them up every once in a while. You can leave them there forever if you want, but most people, I think, find that it's useful to clean out your deactivated books, either reactivate or delete them from time to time. Yes, wait, I did say deactivated books do not count against your book limit if you have a book limit on your network.
Thank you. I'm almost positive I talked to some of the Pressbooks folks, and I got a different answer like about a year ago. And we've been going with that the whole time, but that's great news. Thanks.
That was my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong, but you tell them Steele said that and then get me in trouble instead of you. Sorry about that.
Will do.
Okay. Cheryl writes, we recently had a situation where an author decided to monetize their book and wanted to delete the existing press book. We downgraded them to subscribers so they couldn't do that and explained why. Now we have a policy that authors can't delete their own books if they're public and people are relying on them. Wow. I hadn't even thought of that possibility, says Amanda. We hadn't either. Author got bad advice from a new publisher that Creative Commons licenses could be revoked. Nope, not true. Wow, exciting times over at Arizona. Anything you wanted to add about that, Cheryl, or caution people about?
It was an unexpected situation, and we've had a few that have come up as we've told authors about the accessibility requirements, where one has decided, I no longer want to work on the book. I want to deactivate it, and we said no to that as well, explaining that people are relying on these books. So yeah, that knowing the differences between deleting, deactivating, and archiving has been very important to us.
Yeah, thank you. There are a couple of guide chapters that I'll link to here. One of them is how to use the user list. So this is like some of the advice and tips that Jessica shared in their presentation are here in this guide chapter. And the other guide chapter is about using the book list. And this is a bit more about what Lauren was showing and sharing. So those two chapters are from our network manager guide and should help with a lot of the cases that we're describing. I'm jumping back into the chat and I'm trying to see. Okay, so Lauren, you asked, for SSO networks like ours, are there possible fixes in the future for easily identifying and removing non-admin users from the network, especially those that get added via Canvas LTI, without interfering with their ability to create an account in the future? I will say this may be ignorance or maybe misunderstanding. Could you explain to me your understanding of what happens with their ability to create accounts in the future? This is news to me, and I want to make sure I understand your experience before I respond.
When I had asked maybe a year ago,
Okay.
what the problem would be with deleting users. I was told that if we delete their account and then they come back to the university later, it would be a problem for them using their UW Net ID to like revive their account or have a new account again. And so that was why we avoided
Oh,
deleting users. That was my understanding that we should avoid deleting users for that reason.
that is news to me. I don't want to
Oh,
speak
okay.
authoritatively, but Mitch, does that sound familiar to you at all? Is there anything that you're aware of on that?
I think this is something that support checked in with others about. So
Okay.
I can't speak to this
Okay.
authoritatively either, but I would check in with
I'll
colleagues
sh-
to
okay.
learn more about what the discussion was there.
I'll share my understanding, Lauren, which is what happens. There's two things that happen. One is when you create a regular end user, we call regular, they're given a username and they have a local password, and they use that username and password to log in. If users are created via SSO, there's a couple of options, and I just want to share this screen so people can see what the option is. Depending on your network, if you're configuring a network via SAML, which is the most common version of SSO, there's a really important setting here. And it's if the user does not have a Pressbooks account, what should happen? Should we refuse access or should we add the new user? In most cases, people that are using SSO use the add new user, which means when a person logs in via SSO, we check and say, is there already a user on the network that has that unique identifier in their user metadata? If not, then we say, is there already a user that has this email address? If so, we'll match and we'll store the user identifier in their meta, so we'll always match them in the future. Now, adding a new user says, let's say we did that check and we didn't find them. Okay, that means they need an account, create the account. So it's a form of allowing self-registration, but only for people using SSO. If that's the case and you're doing this, then even if you deleted someone and they come back next week and use SSO, they should always be able to have their account provision. We'll never block them from having an account. The case
Okay.
where it might be a problem would be if you said refuse access. They would have to have an account created previously, which in my view kind of defeats the point of SSO because then you're having to create the account locally and then only then can they log in with SSO. So in most cases, I think adding the user, and there shouldn't be a conflict. The other thing that people can choose to do is if they really want, if you have the network setting here, so the network settings that we were talking about earlier, let me show. If you allow book administrators to invite people to collaborate on their book, you also run the risk of them inviting people you don't want on your network. And so some people will combine email registration limitations like what Ed was talking about. So we'll say if you have a pressbooks.com account or if you have a uw.edu or if you have a, I don't know, UW Tacoma, I'm making this up. These are the three email domains that we're going to let people get registered with. So you could save those changes and say that's when invites come in, they have to have one of those email addresses. Over on the SSO, you would just simply say bypass those restrictions so that anything they come in with SSO, we never have problems. This is the maximally useful way to do SSO. I think it's to add new user and to bypass the email registrations. The one place that I could see maybe a concern or a problem would be if you're using Pressbooks results, the user attempts are stored in connection with the user. If you delete the user, we still have their user attempts that are stored in our database, but the user is then gone. And so it's going to be harder to audit pass grade performance because you've deleted the user. We still have the logs, but I don't think that's going to cause a problem once the course has ended because if they are enrolled in a new course, they click the link, it's just going to provision a new account for them and keep track of those attempts separately for that new course. The thing that I'd be really careful about though is deleting users while a course is ongoing. That might mess up their problem in the course. But to the best of my knowledge, there's not an issue with removing users and then coming back. I don't know what would cause that issue, but if you were told something different from support, I don't want to speak out of turn and we can dig into it a bit deeper, but I'm not
Okay.
aware of any issue. Kestrel says, what about unpublished books? Do those count against your book limit? Yeah, if they're active, as long as they're not deactivated, then they would be part of your book limit. I think if you have a different agreement with your account manager, then I don't know. But my general understanding is that um, people's contracts may vary. So I don't want to speak out of turn. Linda says, for the students with LTI results related accounts, is that SSO or are they self-registering? What they're doing is they're clicking a link in a course and they're being provisioned an account in order to participate with LTI or Pressbooks results. Yeah.
Using their information from the system. They're
Yeah,
not
it's
having to fill
whatever
out a
it's whatever the
form.
LMS gives us. They don't ask for information. It just the LTI connection exchanges a unique identifier and an email address and whatever is passed through the LTI connection. Yeah.
So if I deleted them
Yeah.
in one semester and they're doing results again in another semester, they're not going to have to re-register or anything. It's going
No,
to
they
be
just click the link.
automatic.
They'll be provisioned silently with an account just like they were before. It will probably be a new account because their old accounts deleted didn't match with them, but it shouldn't cause any issues. It's in on the back end of Pressbooks, it would be as if there were two separate students rather than the same student taking two different courses. But as long as you're fine with that, there's no technical issue or limitation there.
Thanks.
Can I just say, I think something that would be really useful with that is because we have so many people that are being added through Canvas as subscribers, we've started this new like sending onboarding messaging, like looking at, so I get an email every time a new user is added, and it's like hundreds of emails like new user added. And so then batching those and sending an email saying like, welcome to Pressbooks, here's our policies and guidelines. That would be easier if when the person logged into Pressbooks, they got like a custom message from us about user policies and guidelines, or
Totally.
maybe there's a workaround for that so that we're not having to like track who's being added to the network and then hand
I
sending them a message. So
I
sorry
think I
to
think you're
jump in with that.
and I would say to that point, Lauren, I think you're totally right. The origin of the user matters a ton. If the intent is I've created this user account so that you can create content, you want them to have a different experience. Whereas I'm accessing this book as a student, I have an account created for me, but I have no intention of creating. I don't need the same onboarding experience. And so being able to differentiate that, there are no tools for you as a network manager to differentiate the origin and the source of the user right now. We're only storing it in the user meta, but it's not visible. And I think some approach to help make that visible and help you differentiate so that you could have different onboarding tracks for different type of users is a great idea. Yeah, we're aware of that. We just one day, I think, I hope. There was another question about does a book need an admin? And I lost it in the chat. Can someone remind me what that question was? Where did it go?
Oh, that was exactly the question is
Oh, great.
does a book need an admin?
No, a book doesn't have to have a user with the administrator role. So let me kind of show and explain this a little bit because this can be confusing. In the Network Manager Guide, we tried to revise this opening chapter to kind of clarify this a little bit. It's the introduction to the Network Manager Guide because this is such a confusing point for many people. There are three broad categories of users on a Pressbooks Enterprise network. There's the network manager, who's the demigod. If you are on a shared network like Jessica, you might have institutional managers, which are like your demigods, but for a single institution out of many institutions. And then there are what we call regular end users. Almost everybody on your network will be a regular end user. And when you're a regular end user, then we get into the user roles in a book. Okay. So within a book, you can have 0 users, you can have 1 user, 5 users, 10 users, as many users as you want to have. And users can have any role that you want them to have. So I might be an end user on Lauren's network, and in one book, I might have the role of administrator, which means I can administer the book, I can manage the users and settings, I can add and edit chapters, I can publish chapters, etc. And in another book, I might have the role of an editor. In a third book, I might have the role of author. So the role I have can be different from book to book. And a book could totally exist with 3 editors and no one in the administrator role. Implicitly, the network manager is always an administrator in every book. But you can choose whether you give individual users which role in that book. So the roles are based in the book. It is helpful to have an admin in most books because there are some things that only admins can do. But there are some Pressbooks Network managers that say, I don't want any of my users to be book administrators. I want to do that myself. I need more control. I don't want to let users manage users on their own book or control settings. I want to control settings. And so you don't have to have a book administrator, but most of the time you do. Whoever creates the book by default is the book's administrator. They're given the administrator role because they created it, but they don't have to remain in that role. They could be changed, it could be altered, or you could choose not to assign that role at all.
Hey,
Thanks for
Steele,
being
can I service a theme from the chat?
Yes, please.
A couple of us were talking about archiving books
Yes.
or what to do with older content. And some people said, oh, I moved them to my institutional repository. Oh, I have new editions of books. And a few of us mentioned that it might be nice if we could put a custom message on that archive to direct people to the next edition, the next version, their institutional repository if they're saving a PDF somewhere, things like that.
Yeah, so the way to do that right now is going to be the book description itself, because the banner message is universal and the same. But you're saying you'd want to add a unique addendum to the banner message for individual books.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I might put that
We can
into
write that
an
down and
idea.
add it as a feature request and see
Yeah.
what can be done about that. Thank you, Ed. Janelle wants occasional office hours. Yeah, we keep your eyes peeled for that, Janelle. We're going to be talking about that, and we might have something to announce on that front for too long. I want to say thanks so much, Lauren and Jessica. This was great. This was really useful. I think people learned a lot. We'll be planning to resume this again in September, the first Tuesday of September. We'll have the next meeting of the Pressbooks User Group. Check the forum for an update about what we're talking about in September. If you had suggestions or ideas or things you really want to discuss, let us know. Send us a message, and we'll try to address them in future user group meetings. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of our user community. Thank you again to Jessica and Lauren. Appreciate you both. Enjoy your summer.